The hallways of Robert Russell Elementary School in San Antonio hadn't changed much in 40 years. The same worn tile floors echoed with children's footsteps, the same inspirational posters adorned the walls, and in the principal's office, Grant Holloway, now 83 years old, still arrived every morning at 6:30 sharp, just as he had done for nearly half a century. Few of the current students or their parents knew the full story of the elderly principal who moved a bit slower these days but never missed a morning greeting at the school gates. His suits were always pressed, though slightly dated, and his smile remained as warm and encouraging as it had been when he first took the position back in the 1970s. Every penny of the school's limited budget went to student programs and essential supplies, leaving little for updates to his small office or the aging building. Heath Montgomery, the school district's superintendent, had gently suggested retirement several times over the past few years. But Grant would simply smile and say, "Every child deserves someone who believes in them completely. I'll keep doing this as long as I can make a difference." What he didn't mention was that his modest principal's pension would barely cover his basic living expenses, let alone the medical bills that had been piling up since his wife's passing. This particular morning found Grant reviewing the school's latest budget constraints. The aging building needed repairs they couldn't afford, and several crucial educational programs were at risk of being cut. Yet he maintained his optimistic demeanor as he prepared for another day of encouraging young minds and nurturing dreams, just as he had done for generations of students, including one very special young man who had quite literally outgrown the school's halls. Isaiah Brooks, the school's maintenance supervisor, knocked on Grant's office door with the morning maintenance report. "The gym floor's getting worse, Mr. Holloway," he said, concern evident in his voice. "We can't keep patching it much longer." Grant nodded, adding this to his mental list of challenges to somehow overcome. The gym held a special place in his heart. It was where he had first noticed a particularly tall fourth grader's natural athletic ability and leadership potential, long before anyone knew the name Shaquille O'Neal would become legendary. Jack Penrose, one of the current teachers, poked his head in with an update about the upcoming basketball program. "We might have to cancel it this year, sir. The equipment's just too worn, and with the budget cuts." Grant's face showed a flicker of sadness before his characteristic optimism returned. "We'll find a way, Jack. We always do. These kids need more than just academics. They need hope. They need opportunities to shine." What none of them knew was that across town, in a luxury hotel suite, Shaquille O'Neal was preparing for what he thought would be a routine business meeting. His assistant, Keaton Wells, was briefing him on his schedule when a familiar name on a local news website caught his eye. "Local elementary school principal celebrates 50 years of service," the headline read. Below it was a photo that made Shaq pause mid-stride, a picture of the man who had first put a basketball in his enormous hands and told him he could be anything he wanted to be. "Keaton," Shaq said, his voice unusually quiet, "clear my schedule for tomorrow. There's someone I need to see." Back at Robert Russell Elementary, Grant was doing what he did best, turning limited resources into maximum impact. He helped Noah Sinclair, a struggling third grader, work through a difficult math problem. He encouraged Orion West, a shy first grader, to join the reading circle. Each interaction was infused with the same genuine care and attention he had given to thousands of students over his 5 decades of service. During lunch period, he sat at his desk, eating the same modest sandwich he brought every day, reviewing old yearbooks as he often did during his brief breaks. His fingers lingered on a page from 1981, where a young Shaquille O'Neal's smile beamed from a class photo. Grant remembered that day clearly, how he had to convince the photographer to let Shaq stand instead of sit because even then, he was too tall for the standard class photo arrangement. Preston Gray, the school's current basketball coach, came in with more discouraging news about the gym floor. "We had to rope off another section today, Mr. Holloway. It's becoming a safety issue." Grant sighed, his optimism tested but not broken. "We'll figure something out, Preston. We have to. Every child deserves a chance to find their passion, just like..." He trailed off, looking at the old yearbook photo again. Preston followed his gaze and smiled, recognizing the future NBA legend in his elementary school days. "You never talk much about having taught Shaq," he observed. "Because it wasn't about teaching Shaq," Grant replied softly. It was about teaching Shaquille O'Neal, a young boy who needed to believe in himself as much as I believed in him. Just like every other child who's walked through these halls. What Grant didn't mention was how he had used his own money to buy basketball shoes for young Shaquille when he noticed the boy's feet growing faster than his family could keep up with. Or how he had stayed late countless evenings to let him practice in the gym, offering not just coaching but life lessons that went far beyond basketball. Quentin Shaw, one of the school board members, arrived for an unscheduled visit. His expression suggested more budget cuts were coming. Grant straightened his tie, prepared to once again fight for his students' needs with the same dedication he had shown for 50 years. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the school windows, Grant made his usual rounds, checking on after-school programs, encouraging struggling students, and maintaining the positive atmosphere that had become his legacy. He moved a bit slower than he used to, but his purpose remained as strong as ever. What he couldn't know was that across town, Shaquille O'Neal was making phone calls, setting plans in motion that would transform not just the school, but the life of the man who had helped transform his. The NBA legend had never forgotten the principal who had believed in him long before anyone else did, who had seen past his unusual size to recognize the leader within. The day wound down as it always did, with Grant being the last to leave the building. He carefully locked up, straightened a crooked poster, and picked up a few pieces of paper from the hallway floor. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference, new chances to help young dreams take flight. As he walked to his modest car in the fading light, he had no idea that tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow would remind him that sometimes the seeds of kindness planted decades ago can bloom in the most unexpected and magnificent ways. But for now, he simply headed home, carrying the weight of the school's challenges and the hopes of its students with the same quiet dignity he had shown for half a century. The next morning arrived with the same predictable rhythm that had marked Grant Holloway's 50 years at Robert Russell Elementary. He arrived in the pre-dawn quiet, his old sedan the first car in the parking lot as always. The morning light was just beginning to touch the tops of the school buildings as he unlocked the front doors, unaware that this ordinary Tuesday would become extraordinary. Rowan Blackwell, the school secretary, arrived shortly after, carrying her usual stack of paperwork detailing the latest budget constraints. She watched with quiet concern as Grant studied the numbers, his weathered hands moving across the columns with the same careful attention he gave to every aspect of running the school. "We'll have to postpone the building repairs again," he said softly, more to himself than to Rowan. "The children's programs have to come first." What he didn't say was that he had already been quietly paying for some of the smaller repairs out of his own modest savings. Seth Brantley, the school's young music teacher, rushed in with excitement about an upcoming student concert, only to deflate slightly when reminded of the limited resources available. But Grant's response was characteristic of his leadership style. "Sometimes, Mr. Brantley, our greatest creative moments come from our greatest challenges. Tell me your ideas and we'll find a way." Across town, Shaquille O'Neal was already in motion. Tate Winslow, his financial advisor, listened in amazement as the basketball legend outlined his plans. "It's not just about fixing the school," Shaq explained. "It's about honoring someone who saw potential in a kid who was too tall, too clumsy, and too unsure of himself to see it in himself." Back at the school, the morning routine continued. Grant stood at the front gates, greeting each student by name, offering encouraging words and warm smiles. Upton Reese, a first grader struggling with family issues at home, received an extra moment of attention. "Remember what we talked about yesterday?" Grant said gently. "Every day is a new chance to be amazing." The hallways filled with the usual morning chaos, but something was different. Vaughn Mercer, the district's facilities manager, arrived unexpectedly with a team of surveyors. They moved through the building taking measurements and notes, offering no explanation beyond routine inspection when Grant inquired. Around mid-morning, Wyatt Callahan, the school's security guard, noticed an unusual number of well-dressed people arriving in luxury vehicles. They gathered in the parking lot, speaking in hushed tones and checking their phones frequently. Among them was Zeke Hamilton, a well-known local contractor, and Jonas Crow, whose construction company had built several community centers in the area. Grant was in his office, helping a student work through a disciplinary issue with the same patience and wisdom he had shown for decades, when the first whispers of something extraordinary began to spread through the school. Easton Hale, one of the playground monitors, burst in with news that made everyone pause. A fleet of black SUVs had just pulled into the school parking lot. The NBA legend's arrival was characteristically larger than life, yet somehow perfectly suited to the moment. Shaq had to duck to enter through the same doors he had once rushed through as a student, his familiar smile lighting up the hallway. But it wasn't just his physical presence that commanded attention, it was the look of genuine emotion on his face as he took in the familiar surroundings. Abigail Monroe, a third-grade teacher who had been at the school for decades herself, watched in amazement as Shaquille O'Neal made his way through the halls he had once roamed as a student. "He looks just like his fourth-grade picture," she whispered to Beatrice Sloan, just about 4 feet taller. The whispers and excitement spread through the school like wildfire. Camilla Rhodes, the current PE teacher, had to calm her class as they pressed against the gym windows, trying to catch a glimpse of the basketball legend. But Shaq wasn't heading to the gym, he was making his way directly to the principal's office, where Grant Holloway was still unaware of the approaching reunion. Daphne Blair, a student teacher, would later describe the moment. Mr. Holloway was at his desk, helping a student with math problems, just like any other day. He didn't even look up when the door opened. But when that shadow fell across his desk, a shadow so big it darkened the whole room, his expression, I'll never forget it. Grant Holloway looked up slowly, his eyes widening as they traveled up the impressive height of his former student. For a moment, neither man spoke. The only sound was the quiet tick of the same clock that had marked time in that office for nearly 5 decades. "Mr. Holloway," Shaq's deep voice carried an unusual softness. "You're still here. Still making a difference every single day." Grant stood slowly, emotion evident in his eyes but his voice steady. "Shaquille O'Neal, you've grown a bit since you were in my office last." The gentle humor in his voice was the same that had helped a young, oversized boy feel comfortable in his own skin. The NBA star moved forward, carefully navigating the small office that seemed even smaller with his presence. "I saw an article about your 50 years of service," he said. "But that's not the whole story, is it? The article didn't mention how you bought basketball shoes for kids who needed them, how you stayed late so they could practice, how you made every single student feel like they mattered." Grant's modest dismissal was characteristic of his nature. "Every child deserves someone who believes in them completely," he said, repeating the philosophy that had guided his half-century of service. "And you believed in me," Shaq responded, his voice thick with emotion. "Not in Shaq the basketball player, that came later. You believed in Shaquille, the too tall kid who didn't quite fit in anywhere, who needed someone to see past his size to who he could become." The moment was interrupted by Elodie Hart, the school nurse, rushing in with news about the aging gym floor claiming another victim, a scraped knee that could have been worse. Grant's immediate concern for the student was telling, but Shaq's expression showed he had already known about the school's challenges. "Mr. Holloway," Shaq said, his tone shifting to something more purposeful, "I didn't just come here to reminisce. I came because I saw that article and realized something. You're still fighting for kids, still making dreams possible, still putting everyone else first. But this time, someone needs to fight for you." Grant started to protest, to say that he was fine, that the school's needs came first, but Shaq held up a hand that could palm a basketball. "Before you say anything, I want you to come with me. There's something you need to see." As they moved through the hallways together, the NBA legend and the elderly principal who had helped shape his character, the contrast in their physical size was striking. But there was something powerful in how Shaq naturally slowed his pace to match Grant's, how he positioned himself to support his former principal if needed, how he treated him with the same respect he had received as a struggling student. The hallways had cleared of students now, but every window they passed revealed faces pressed against the glass, watching this extraordinary reunion unfold. Freya Lowell, the school librarian, would later say she saw tears in both men's eyes as they walked past the old photographs lining the walls, photographs that showed 5 decades of students whose lives had been touched by Grant Holloway's unwavering dedication. They approached the gym doors, where a group of people in business suits waited with barely contained excitement. Georgia Wynn, the district's public relations director, stepped forward with a camera crew, but Shaq waved them back. "This moment isn't for the cameras," he said firmly. "This is about something more important." Grant looked up at his former student, confusion evident on his face. "Shaquille, what's going on?" The NBA legend's smile was warm, but his eyes were serious. "Mr. Holloway, you spent 50 years investing in others. Now it's time for someone to invest in you and your dreams for this school." He pushed open the gym doors, revealing what waited inside, something that would transform not just the school, but the life of the man who had transformed so many others. The gymnasium doors swung open to reveal a sight that made Grant Holloway stop in his tracks. Where he had expected to see the worn floor and aging equipment, he found instead a small army of contractors, architects, and designers. Blueprint drawings covered folding tables, and Harper Ellis, one of the city's most renowned educational facility designers, stood at the center of it all. Isla Montgomery, Shaq's project manager, stepped forward with a tablet displaying a comprehensive renovation plan. Not just for the gym, but for the entire school. "Mr. Holloway," she began, "Mr. O'Neill has a vision for Robert Russell Elementary that we'd like to share with you." The elderly principal's hands trembled slightly as he looked at the plans. New classrooms equipped with the latest technology. A state-of-the-art gymnasium. A modern library with computer stations. A fully equipped science lab. Every upgrade and improvement he had dreamed of but never dared to hope for. Josie Vance, the district's financial officer who had so often been the bearer of budget cuts, stood nearby with tears in her eyes. "It's all approved, Mr. Holloway. Every single bit of it. Mr. O'Neill has not only pledged the funds but has brought together a team of donors and supporters to ensure the school's future." Shaq placed his massive hand gently on his former principal's shoulder. "This isn't charity, Mr. Holloway. This is an investment in the kind of education and support you gave me. The kind that changes lives." Kaya Whitmore, one of the project architects, began explaining the timeline. The renovations would be completed in phases to minimize disruption to the school year. "We've already conducted preliminary surveys," she said. "We can begin work on the gym immediately." Lillian Hale, a current student's grandmother and longtime community activist, had been invited to witness the moment. "This isn't just about building improvements," she observed. "This is about honoring 50 years of dedication to our children." The plans went far beyond physical renovations. Maisie James, an educational consultant, outlined new programs that would be implemented: advanced STEM initiatives, arts education, sports programs, and after-school activities that would ensure every child had the opportunity to discover and develop their talents. Nora Lennox, the school's veteran art teacher who had been making do with donated supplies for years, couldn't hold back her tears as she saw the plans for a fully equipped art studio. "Mr. Holloway always found a way to keep our programs going," she said. "Now we can give the children everything they deserve." Grant stood in the middle of this whirlwind of activity, his usual composure slightly shaken by the magnitude of what was unfolding. Odessa Blake, his longtime friend and fellow educator, stepped forward to steady him. "Grant," she said softly, "you gave so much to so many. It's time to let someone give back." Shaq guided his former principal to a chair, knowing the emotional weight of the moment. "Mr. Holloway," he said, kneeling down to meet the older man's eyes, "do you remember what you told me when I was struggling with my free throws? You said, sometimes the biggest victories come from the smallest beginnings. Well, you were that beginning for me. For so many of us." Penelope Shaw, the school board president, arrived with official documents in hand. "This isn't just a one-time gift," she explained. "Mr. O'Neill has established an endowment fund that will ensure the school's programs and maintenance for years to come." Quinn Avery, a local news reporter who had been quietly documenting the scene, captured the moment Grant realized the full scope of what was happening. His expression, she would later write, was that of a man seeing a lifetime of dreams suddenly, unexpectedly, wonderfully coming true. The revelation continued as Romalie Hayes, the project's lead contractor, walked them through the gymnasium. "The new floor will be regulation size," she explained, "with the same specifications as professional courts. But we're keeping something special. She pointed to a section of the old floor that would be preserved and mounted on the wall, the spot where a young Shaquille O'Neal had practiced his first slam dunk. Serena Banks, the current school counselor, watched as groups of students pressed their faces against the gym windows, trying to understand what was happening. "This isn't just about buildings," she observed. "This is about showing them that dreams really do come true." Tamsin Clark, one of the school's youngest teachers, was already imagining the possibilities the new facilities would bring. "Mr. Holloway always told us to dream big for our students," she said. "Now we can actually deliver on those dreams." The morning progressed into afternoon as more details were revealed. Ursula Merrick, the district's curriculum coordinator, presented plans for enhanced educational programs that would now be possible. Valerie Holt, a community business leader, announced partnerships that would provide internships and real-world learning opportunities for the students. Throughout it all, Grant remained characteristically focused on the students. "When can they start using the new facilities?" he asked, his mind already on how these improvements would benefit the children. Winnie Drake, the construction project manager, explained the carefully planned phases. "We'll work around the school schedule," she assured him. "The students' education won't be disrupted." Zena Blair, a former student who now worked as an educational technology specialist, demonstrated the new equipment that would be installed in every classroom. "The children will have access to the same tools and technology as the most prestigious private schools," she explained. As the afternoon wore on, more members of the community arrived to witness the transformation beginning. Zinnia Carr, whose 3 children had all attended Robert Russell Elementary under Grant's leadership, brought a photo album of school memories. "Look at all the lives you've touched," she said, showing him pictures of students who had gone on to become doctors, teachers, engineers, and yes, professional athletes. Annalise Frost, the local paper's education reporter, asked Grant how it felt to see his life's work honored in such a significant way. His response was characteristic. "This isn't about honoring me," he said. "This is about giving our children the opportunities they deserve." Bridget Monroe, who had been one of Grant's first students and was now a grandmother herself, arrived with tears in her eyes. "You never gave up on any of us," she told him. "And now, look, one of your students is making sure you never have to give up on your dreams for this school." The day continued to unfold with more surprises. Celeste Hayes, a prominent local philanthropist inspired by Shaq's gesture, announced additional funding for scholarships. Delilah Green, whose catering company had grown from a small business loan Grant had helped her secure 20 years ago, arrived with food for everyone, turning the occasion into an impromptu celebration. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the gymnasium windows, Grant finally found a quiet moment to speak privately with his former student. "Shaquille," he said, his voice thick with emotion, This is beyond anything I could have imagined." Shaq smiled, but his eyes were serious. "Mr. Holloway, when I was a kid in your office, feeling too big for my desk and too different to fit in, you told me something I never forgot. You said, 'It's not about fitting in, it's about standing tall in who you are.' Well, you've stood tall for 50 years, helping kids find their way. Now it's our turn to help you." The NBA legend reached into his jacket and pulled out one final surprise, a document that would ensure Grant Holloway's legacy would continue long after the renovations were complete. But that revelation would have to wait, as the day's events had already transformed not just a school, but an entire community's understanding of how one person's dedication could inspire such magnificent acts of giving back. As evening settled over Robert Russell Elementary, the excitement of the day transformed into something deeper and more reflective. The contractors and designers had departed, leaving behind their plans and promises of tomorrow's transformation. But in the old gymnasium, lit now by the warm glow of sunset through the high windows, Shaquille O'Neal had one final revelation to share with his former principal. Estelle Vaughn, the school district's legal counsel, handed Shaq the document he had been waiting to present. Around them gathered a small group of witnesses, those who had been part of the school's history and those who would shape its future. Fiona Hollis, whose mother had been one of Grant's first students, stood ready with a camera to capture the moment. "Mr. Holloway, Shaq began, his voice carrying the same respect it had held when he was a fourth grader in the principal's office, "there's one more thing we need to discuss. You see, this isn't just about renovating a building. It's about preserving a legacy." Giselle Brooks, who had helped organize the day's events, brought forward a leather-bound folder embossed with the school's logo. Inside was the document that would transform Grant's life work into something eternal. "This," Shaq explained, opening the folder, "is the establishment of the Grant Holloway Educational Excellence Foundation. It's not just an endowment for the school, though it is that too. It's a living testament to everything you taught us about dedication, belief, and the power of education to change lives." Hattie Quinn, a prominent education advocate who had helped structure the foundation, explained its scope. The foundation would not only ensure the school's continued excellence but would also provide scholarships, teacher development programs, and community outreach initiatives, all embodying the principles Grant had demonstrated throughout his career. Imogen Lee, a former student who had become an educational researcher, presented data showing the impact Grant's leadership had had on graduation rates, college attendance, and career success among his former students. "Your influence," she explained, "created ripples that have touched thousands of lives." Juliet Vance, who had been tracking these outcomes for years, added, "And now, through this foundation, those ripples will continue for generations to come." Grant sat quietly, taking in the magnitude of what was being presented. Kendall Rivers, who had been his assistant principal for the past decade, saw tears forming in the elderly educator's eyes. "This foundation," Shaq continued, "will ensure that everything you built here, the commitment to every child, the belief in unlimited potential, the dedication to excellence, will continue long after we're all gone. But there's one condition." Lilith Monroe, one of the foundation's board members, stepped forward with a pen. "We need you to guide us," she said, "to show us how to maintain the spirit that made this school so special under your leadership." Magnolia Trent, who had helped draft the foundation's mission statement, explained further. "You won't just be the namesake, Mr. Holloway. You'll be the heart of this foundation, showing us how to carry your vision forward." Noelle Sterling, a local business leader who had pledged matching funds, shared her perspective. "What you created here wasn't just a school, it was a model for how education should work. Now we can share that model with others." Odessa Wynn, whose 3 generations of family had attended the school, brought forward a scrapbook of collected memories. "Look at all the lives you've touched," she said, showing pictures spanning 5 decades. "Now imagine how many more will be touched through this foundation." Phoebe Clark, the current student body president, had been quietly observing. Now she spoke up, her young voice carrying the weight of future generations. "Mr. Holloway, you always tell us that education is about more than just learning facts, it's about learning who we can become. This foundation will help kids like me keep learning that lesson." Rosalind Hale, who had been compiling the school's history, shared something remarkable. "In 50 years, she said, you never took a single day off. Never stopped believing in your students. Never gave up on anyone. This foundation will ensure that spirit of dedication lives on." Saffron Carrick, an architect specializing in educational spaces, explained how the renovated school would become a model for others. "The physical transformation is just the beginning," she said. "This will be a place where educators from around the country can come to learn your methods, your philosophy." Thea Whitaker, who had been quietly filming the day's events, captured the moment Grant finally found his voice. "I never did any of this for recognition," he said softly. "I did it because every child deserves someone who believes in them completely." "We know," Shaq responded, his massive frame kneeling beside his former principal's chair. "That's exactly why we're doing this. Because you taught us that the greatest gift you can give someone is believing in them until they learn to believe in themselves." Una Maddox, who had helped coordinate the foundation's educational programs, outlined how Grant's philosophy would be integrated into teacher training initiatives. "Your methods, your approach, they'll become part of how we prepare the next generation of educators." Vera Whitman, whose grandchildren now attended the school, spoke about the community impact. "This school has always been more than just a building," she said. "It's been the heart of our community. Now it will continue to beat strongly." As evening deepened into night, the final details were shared. Willa Morgan, the Foundation's financial advisor, explained how the endowment would work. Zandra Lowe, an educational policy expert, described how the Foundation's influence would extend beyond just one school to impact educational practices nationwide. Yvette Moore, whose family had been part of the school community for 3 generations, summed up the feeling in the room. "Mr. Holloway, you gave us all something priceless. The belief that we could be more than our circumstances, more than our challenges. Now that gift will keep giving." Finally, Zoe Vaughn, one of Grant's earliest students who had become a teacher herself, brought forward a guest book filled with messages from hundreds of former students. "Your influence," she said, "isn't just in this building or even in this foundation. It's in all of us who learned from you how to stand tall, work hard, and believe in ourselves." As the night drew to a close, Shaq had one final gesture. He presented Grant with a jersey, not an NBA jersey, but a custom-made school jersey with Holloway and the number 50 on the back. "Because some achievements," he said, "are bigger than any championship." Grant stood slowly, holding the jersey with trembling hands. "I never expected," he began, but Shaq interrupted gently. "You never expected anything in return for your dedication," the NBA legend said. "That's exactly why you deserve this and more. You taught me, taught all of us, that true success isn't about what you achieve for yourself. It's about what you help others achieve." The gymnasium lights dimmed, but the glow of what had been accomplished, and what was yet to come, remained bright. Grant Holloway's 50 years of service had not just been honored, they had been transformed into a legacy that would continue to shape lives for generations to come. And in that moment, as principal and former students stood together in the gymnasium where their story had begun, everyone present understood that they were witnessing something remarkable, the perfect blend of past and future, of gratitude and giving, of one generation lifting up another in an endless chain of belief and possibility.